Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming tonight. My name is Adam Sternbergh. I'm the culture editor for the New York Times Magazine. And I'm going to be talking with Greta Gerwig, who co-wrote and starred in the film you just saw.
Hi, thanks for doing this with me. I really appreciate it. And thanks for all showing up and being so warm. It's really lovely.
Since we have the final shot of the film on the screen right now, I'm going to ask you my first question, which is about the final shot of the film, with the bent name card and the post box, which to me is a really endearing image and was mentioned quite frequently in positive reviews of the film. I have to imagine there's a story behind that.
You mean like the idea to end the film like that?
Well, the idea to end the film like that, and also the idea of someone's truncated name stuck in their mailbox.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of, I think when we were writing it, it was a moment that, in some ways, I think the best moments of writing are things that sneak up on you. They're not things that you know right away. It's almost like you write it down and then you look at it again and then you look at it again and then you're like, oh, that's the whole movie. Like, that's what it is. That's the metaphor of where she's going, and she's not there yet, but she's almost there. And I think we collected so many moments about life, and I think for us, it's always when the details that are true to life and the things that are poetically resonant somehow converge. And that felt like that. But really, actually, that shot was, we did have to hold on that. That's a shot. That's not a still frame. So, and if you like run it fast, you can see the light change. And we were in this atrium in a building in Chinatown. And like the landlady showed up and she was like, what the hell are you guys doing? And we were like, we just need to shoot this frame for a long time. Like it was, but they were very sweet and they let us do it. But it was difficult to find a mailbox that didn't have lines on it. I mean, this is like nerdy film stuff, but that causes the film to look like it's vibrating when there are all the lines. So we found this one perfect mailbox and then we like made them angry.
And not to obsess about this one shot, I will ask you about other things in the film. But what was the relationship between the title of the film and the idea for that shot?
Again, it was we'd written it into the script, and then we were thinking about calling it Frances, but then there was a movie that was already called Frances, and we didn't want to do that. And then I think it just came out at us like, oh, obviously that's the title. Obviously that's it. And that's the last image. But it wasn't, again, it was that thing where you do it and then you realize what you did right afterwards. It was there, we'd put it there, and then we luckily correctly identified it.
It sounds like at least one person here has seen the other movie called Frances, which is about a very different Frances. You mentioned the co-writing process with Noah Baumbach. Can you talk a bit about how that worked and how the sort of generation of ideas and the scenes were built between the two of you?
Sure. Well, I think in some ways he didn't necessarily... I don't know that he was certain that we were going to be fully co-writing this when he asked me if I'd be interested in making a movie this way. I think he thought maybe I'd have some ideas, but then I'd been acting a lot at that period in my life, and I'd been writing continuously, but I hadn't finished anything, and I felt like I had all this stored up material. So when he asked if I had any ideas, I was like, funny you should ask, here's a bunch of things, and I was totally ready for it, and I was very excited, and he liked it, and so we started kind of culling from that, and then he started adding things, and we just really started building a document through email because we were mostly writing alone, writing scenes alone, and then trading the scenes, and I was working on other things, and he was working on other things, so it was it would get left and then picked up again, and it took about a year, and I think the most we did it together, like physically in the same room, we did we would print it and then we would read it out loud, just trading off parts just to hear it, because I think a lot of it's very rhythmic, and it was almost like we were listening to hear if something was going to catch, and if it caught, then we'd know we'd have to rewrite that line. But it wasn't sitting in front of a computer together saying, and then I say this, and then you say that. It was more it was more solitary in terms of the actual writing.
And what was the genesis of the idea in terms of doing this sort of portrait of this 27-year-old woman adrift in New York? Was that an idea that appealed to you, or was it something he came to you with?
It was an idea. He had an idea of wanting to make a movie in New York that I was going to be in, and that he was interested in doing something. He immediately talked about kind of the French New Wave portrait of youth type films, and that he really loved those, and kind of trying to do something in that style or that world or that tradition. I think in some ways I was a little initially I was a little less interested in it. I was just worried. I just thought, oh no, we can't make another film with kids in an apartment. But then, nobody's made this one, and then you do. I think that's actually a hurdle that you deal with every time you write something or act in something, or you're always faced with. Maybe this is only me and this is my psychology, but all I can think of is all the bad versions of it that have ever existed. And you're like, not two people talking in a restaurant again. Oh God. But then, Quentin Tarantino does it and it's amazing. But for some reason I always think of the bad version first. So I was nervous because I thought, what if we make the bad one? And Noah said, we're not going to make the bad one. So
I think if you know what the bad one looks like, you're already halfway to not making it.
I don't think that's
the
true
person who makes
all.
the bad one doesn't know they're making the bad one.
I think you can know. I feel like I've occasionally known when I'm not. I feel like as an actor, I've occasionally known like this is not going well.
This is the bad one.
Yeah, this is the one, and you like read something and you're like, it's true. I'm not good in that.
As you were working on it, did you start to feel a sort of ownership over the character of Frances? I imagine it must be very interesting to collaborate with someone creating a character that you're also playing the character. At a certain point, you must feel like, I know this character better than he does, or...
Actually, it was funny about writing her because we didn't, I didn't actually feel that way. I felt like we both had locked into her voice pretty... Once we locked in, we knew what it was and why she was funny and how she was big-hearted but also pig-headed and all of the things that she is. And we wrote a scene that's actually not in the movie. That was, I think, the first scene we wrote that we were like, that's Frances. And it's a scene where she meets a woman on the street who used to be her mentor. And the woman has all these groceries, and Frances says, oh, I'll help you carry these groceries. And then she insults the woman by saying, I read that piece in the Times about you. Like, I hate that guy's writing. And but it's kind of sweet too, because and then she follows the woman inside and brings all her groceries in and then eats half of them. And then that's it. And it didn't fit, but it was like, there was something about it that it was so like, that moment when you don't know that someone's who's older than you can be offended, and you're kind of inappropriate, but you're also kind of nice. And I think Noah and I both had that voice in our head the whole time. And I think he had it in him as much as I had it in me. And I didn't really feel like I owned it as an actor until we started making it.
Now, Greta wrote a piece for the Times Magazine about the scene in the movie where Frances is with Sophie in the bathroom and she has the confrontation over Patch, and about how many takes you guys did on that scene. I think it was more than, it was between 30 and 40 by my recollection. And I know Noah did a thing for the Times too about a different scene in the film and also talked about doing 30 takes of the same scene. So is that, can you talk a bit about that sort of style, and as an actor, sort of finding those moments of precision when you're doing the same scene over and over like that?
Yeah, I think, well, the script itself was so set in stone, and we didn't improvise at all. And similarly, the camera movements and the blocking and the framing was very set. Like, it's very locked down, and it doesn't. We wanted it to feel unchoreographed, but we wanted it to be choreographed, and that's really, it's difficult to achieve without doing just a lot of takes. I think it's hard to get that kind of effortless quality in something that's clearly crafted. And anyway, I mean, and also we were shooting on, we shot on a digital camera, so that also allowed us to run a lot more takes. Although I think Noah just does a lot of takes anyway. I think he would do it no matter what. But I think it, in some ways, it gets easier for me. I mean, I talked about this in the piece, but once you sort of, you get over it feeling good, and then you get over it feeling boring and bad, and then you find all these other things that you didn't even know were behind it. And I'm sure it's similar. When I've talked to people I know who've been in very long runs of Broadway plays, they go through it, but every night over a 6-month period, and we do it 40 times in 3 hours or something. But it's kind of similar, like letting the boredom or letting that lead you into something that you did is more interesting somehow. But I ended up really liking it.
I feel like the film it feels very natural and lived in, and so I'm interested to hear that the script was very set and that there wasn't any improvisation, because it feels like the interplay between the characters feels very natural.
Yeah.
Is that how you prefer to work? And do you feel like to get that sort of natural sense, you actually need to have a very rigid script to work from?
No, I mean, I think improvisation can really be great, and especially in film, which responds so well to kind of lightning in a bottle moments. But I think there's a lot of bad improv in the world, and I've made a lot of bad improv in the world, and I mean, there's a lot of great stuff too, but I think for me right now, I'm not really that interested in improvisation, and it's hard for me to watch it right now. I think, well, I'm always more, I mean, this is probably just selfish, but the most exciting thing for me was when we were auditioning people for the movie, that there were these great actors, great New York actors coming in and reading lines I'd written, and like making them better than they were. And there was something so gratifying about watching an actor take a piece of text and make it come alive, that I feel like I don't want to exchange that experience. And I mean, of course, you could always add improv on top, but there's something about an actor making it sing within the parameters of these words that I think is really special, and I love watching.
The relationship between Frances and Sophie is so much at the core of the film. What's the story with Mickey Sumner? Do you know her? Oh. Did you know her before the film? How did you guys develop a rapport?
No, I didn't know her before the film. She auditioned. A lot of people auditioned. To our discredit, we didn't immediately say, "Oh, that's the girl." Like we circled. We kept thinking of her actually as another part, and then we kept coming back to her. And she was so. There was something so unique about her, and so she's such a good actress, and she's such a person. I feel like you want someone who's strong and feel like they can have their own movie in that role. You don't want someone who feels like a best friend. You want someone who feels like they have their own life going on. And she was just, she was just great. But because it was such a long audition process, I felt like it was sort of through the audition process that I got to be close with her. And then when we were shooting, we were just shooting so many hours every day. And but I think she's, you know, she's a real deal actress who can. She was just instantly there, and there was something about the way she said the words that they already had so much life behind them, and it gave me. It was what allowed me to find Frances. That was the weird thing. When she auditioned for Sophie and I was playing Frances, all of a sudden I felt like I had access to Frances because she was Sophie, and then it felt like they were doing it and we were just kind of letting it happen.
That's so funny because the first time I watched the film, I just assumed that you were old friends. You know, that when you wrote the part, you thought, oh, I got to get my old friend Mickey Sumner to play this. And
no, she's not. I mean, she's also nothing like Sophie in life, which really became like hard for me to accept. I was like I'm like Minnie Hitchcock. Like, why aren't you blonde? Or, you know, I just watched Hitchcock the other night.
I also have some great questions from the audience, and since we're sort of veering into the territory of some of the questions, I'm going to pull some out and ask them. Thank you so much for submitting these questions. And I don't have them in any particular order, although that reminded me of one of them. There was a question here. What inspired you to look at female friendships?
I mean, I think there's not enough films about female friendships, and I think I'm pretty interested in women's relationships with each other, whether it's friends or mothers and daughters or sisters. I find them really interesting and really underdocumented. And we didn't set out with any kind of thesis statement of like, we're gonna make a film about ladies where there's no kissing. But I think when we realized that that's what we were doing, it was kind of exciting. Like, what are the stories that exist beyond stories you usually have about women? And I just recently reread. I went to women's college, so this is expected of me, but the Virginia Woolf, A Room of One's Own, and she's writing about reading another female author in it, and she says, she kind of is saying, oh, this author's not so great, but then there's a moment on a page where two women are sitting together and they're knitting, and the women, it's like Karen and Tabitha, and it says, Karen liked Tabitha. And she just stops the whole thing and she's like, what a revolutionary thing. They like each other. Like, and men have never written about that because they don't know what women do when they're not there. How could they know? They just like each other. And I thought it's like, I read this after I'd written the movie, but I felt like, God, Virginia Woolf, you're so right. She is. It's the best essay. It's like everything I've ever meant to say said better.
I feel like if you watch the film with sort of conventional expectations, I remember the first time watching it, you sort of think it's going to be a kind of romantic comedy, and you keep waiting for the man to show up that she's going to, engage in the romantic comedy part, and then of course you realize it is a sort of story of a romance, but it's between these friends. Yeah. We sort of wanted to one of the original, or there was an idea early that we wanted to start the film with the cat breakup, the cat boy, because we sort of wanted it to be a misdirect, like, oh, you think it's going to be about this, and then it's like, no, we're actually going to follow that person on the phone. You're never going to see that guy again. But it felt too cold to start it like that. But it was sort of that playing with the expectations of who's the guy, where's the guy? Oh, there's no guy. There's another question here, which you sort of talked a little bit about, but it's about the moments in the film. And the one moment that reliably makes me laugh the most is that moment when she's in Paris and she goes to the movie theater and asks them about Puss in Boots. because I feel like it just totally captures a very particular feeling of being lost in a foreign city, having this romantic idea of what your experience is going to be, and then the reality of it, just being bored and eating some terrible restaurant, and then going to see Puss in Boots. So, did you sort of start with moments like that, and then try to build scenes around them, or how did that work?
Just because it's my favorite line in the movie, because I think it's the saddest line of all time. It's not even, it's when did Puss in Boots start? She's not even gonna see it from the beginning. It's halfway through. It's like so tragic. No, I mean, that part of the movie was always like, we always thought, oh, this is foolish. We can't actually have her go to Paris. But then the fact that it was so foolish became part of why we were excited to do it. That it would be foolish for her, but also sort of foolish for the movie. Like that we all had to go to Paris, which we all did, and it was. I mean, we did have like the when did Puss in Boots start, and then we did have we wanted her to be eating at the wrong bistro, but then we put her in a McDonald's and it was too sad. It was like, no, can't put her in French McDonald's. That's just too depressing. I mean, we had all these moments, and then we had the dialogue written in, but really just the idea of being in like going to Paris and sleeping through the whole thing. That was a really early Noah idea, and he was like, you know what would be great? This. I was like, we have to make a really happy ending for this person if you make them go through that.
Yeah, I feel like that segment could just be its own short film. Everything from the jet lag to finally getting the call from a friend in the limo on the way back from the airport in New York. It's a particular kind of ennui that comes.
Yeah, it's a sad sequence. It's also, we also liked the fact that it was, at this dinner party and someone mentions they have an apartment. Then by the end, she's like, you know what? I'm gonna go to Paris, which is. I always like in other movies that feeling that plot is just coming out of dialogue in this way, and you can see where they made the connection. You're like, oh, they did mention that. Now you're upset about Sophie, so now you're gonna go to Paris. But like, it almost seems like it's coming out of conversation. I find that happens more in plays than in films, and so I don't know. It's just that thing of like picking up some thread that you didn't think was important, and then you're like, oh, I guess we're going there.
I know because this is a SAG event, there's a lot of people who want to know sort of generally about your acting career, and one of the questions in here is just to talk generally about how you got your start. So maybe you can give us that story.
Well, I would like to say, I would like to say I really am very honored to be here, and I'm very honored to be a member of like the Screen Actors Guild and to be part of actors. I love actors, and I've always wanted to be one, but I didn't think it was necessarily possible because I hadn't gone to a BFA program or a conservatory, and I'd gotten a BA, and I knew I wanted to be in theater or film, but I didn't know how. So I did a lot of tech work and other stuff, and stage managing, and how I really got my start was I had worked on a really small independent film that was at South by Southwest, and I went to South by Southwest my senior year of college, and I met a lot of filmmakers, and I really got along with them, and then I moved to Chicago to make a film called Hannah Takes the Stairs, and there was a bunch of filmmakers who were working on that, and I was still working day jobs, but I made that film, and then I made another film called Baghead with the Duplass brothers, and then I made another film. Oh yeah, Baghead. And then I made another film. This is all within like 6 months. And then I made another film with Joe Swanberg called Nights and Weekends. And then I didn't. And then I was tutoring. I was doing different things, and I was applying to graduate school for playwriting. And then then I went to South by Southwest again, and then I got an agent, which then I started auditioning, and it was another 2 years of kind of not being able to make a living doing it. But I think for me, and I think part of what Frances was about a little bit was, I mean, obviously making a living is incredibly important, but I think when you're young at a particular moment, I think feeling like you have a community is as important as being able to make ends meet in some cases, feeling like that you have some kind of audience, some kind of outlet that's actually doing it and engaged with it. And I was very, very lucky to have that. And then I started getting more acting work that I was just hired to do, and then it kept going. But it was, I always feel, the reason I think I get kind of being part of like the Screen Actors Guild, I always feel deeply unqualified to do what I do, and I love it, and I so admire people who are great at it. So to be included as part of it, I just am very honored.
Your acting style is very particular, and well, to say style is a bit of a misnomer. My colleague at the Times has described your style as being almost in opposition to the idea of style, which I know he meant as a very great compliment. There's a kind of ease and naturalness to your screen presence. Is that something itself that just sort of comes naturally for you, or is it something you think about, work on, try to hone?
It's more that I actually feel like I tried to kind of hone that out of myself at a certain point. When I started, I felt like I was like I tried to work on what I considered to be more like classical voice training, or trying to get myself to lose tics or lose things that I didn't. I tried to run away from it pretty hard. But I think for me, I think I've settled into the way I act more now than I was in my early 20s, and I think I've accepted that it's not going to look, it's never going to look like textbook anything, but it's going to feel alive to me and right to me, and that's what I need to go towards, instead of looking for the part that feels like official and this is officially good. I think I'll probably I don't have that, but I think for me it's about like accepting what I do feel is alive. But sometimes I'll see an actor that I identify with, and something deep in me kind of resonates with it. And recently it's the French actor Denis Lavant, and he was in that film Holy Motors, and there was something about what he was doing, and I'm not as acrobatic as he is, but there was something about it that I felt like that's the kind of actor I want to be, but not in an aspirational self-hating kind of way, but like I think maybe that if I work at it, that's maybe the kind of actor I actually am, which always feels good to identify yourself in something that feels bigger than you.
That's a really interesting distinction, that idea of not letting go of the actor you think you should be and figuring out the actor that you are, and then being that person.
I think it's really hard. It's really hard to let go of the actor you think you should be and to be the actor you are, but at the same time, never becoming a caricature of yourself, and never stop being, you never want to not be rigorous with yourself, but I think that acting is such a tough profession, and it's so competitive, and it's also on film. It's also external. You can look at it. You can look at what you did, and I think the trick is to to be who you are, but to not ever settle in it, to kind of keep pushing the boundaries of what it is. But I don't know. I think it's a hard, it's an elusive art. It's one of those things that every time you feel like you have it, it gets away from you again. But that's what makes it an art.
It's funny you mentioned. Did you see Holy Motors? I now own an accordion because of that movie.
So do I.
Oh, really?
I do.
Do you know how to play it?
I've just started lessons.
Oh,
yeah.
Really?
Yeah. I want to know how to play the accordion.
It's that one scene in the movie with the accordions.
I could have watched that for like an hour. It was great.
Well, good luck with the lessons. We should meet again in 2 years and see if either of us can actually
Probably
play.
not. Do you really have an accordion?
I am now the owner of an accordion. My wife bought me one for our anniversary.
What a good gift.
It is good. It's huge.
So big. So, yeah.
Yeah.
It's really big.
It's also a big question of where do you practice your accordion?
Not in my apartment.
Yeah. I feel like I have to go to Jones Beach or something.
I know.
This has been Accordion Talk, folks.
Worst Q&A ever.
There is a very technical question that someone here asked, which I am going to ask you.
Sure.
What was it like shooting on a prosumer camera like the 5D Mark III?
Yeah.
As an actress, did it make things easier or harder working around a DSLR?
I don't think I've ever heard the word prosumer. What is
that's a real word.
Consumer and professional combined?
Yes, right? It's like a
Prosumer?
combo.
Yeah.
Good enough for a pro, affordable enough for a consumer, I think.
Got it. Well, I think when we were writing the movie, we knew pretty early on that we wanted to make it in black and white. So we did a lot of camera tests with the late Harris Savides, who was the best, and I miss him. But he put us in touch with Sam Levy, who's the DP on the movie, and he and Sam did all these camera tests that I was in with all these different cameras, like the Alexa and the Red Epic, and there were other cameras that were out at that point. But what we liked about the 5D was we liked that it didn't actually handle motion that well. That kind of gave it the style, that locked-in style, because you can kind of see it pixelate a little bit when it moves. And we liked that there were these limitations to it because it made it feel more like the way people fetishize the limitations of 16 millimeter now or 8 millimeter, like the flare and the flicker and the way it looks, which were actually things that, professional movies didn't want. And there was even a thing of on the 5D that in really low light you can see the digital grid, and we kept it because it's part of the technology that we shot it on. So I mean, I think if it was nice because it did feel like we picked our tool, we decided this tool, and we went into it with saying we like the limitations and we like what it's good at and bad at. The best part of it was, honestly, it's tiny and it looks like a camera. So just a still camera. So we could get away with a lot of shooting in subways and on the street and not be noticed in quite the same way. Although I did find that if you put anything on a tripod, people will look.
I think one of the interesting things about the film is it feels very contemporary in a sense, like very much about what it's like to be that age at this moment in New York, but also very timeless. You mentioned the New Wave films earlier, and can you talk a little bit about sort of the style you were going for, the use of the anachronistic music and the black and white and all of that?
I don't think we ever tried to make it feel modern or generational in any way. I think we were trying to write this character as well as we could and this story as well as we could. I think probably Noah and I are both we have some old spirit. That's a deodorant? No, is it? Yeah, we have deodorants. No, I think. I think we have. I always feel like I fall in love with art forms right as they're kind of exiting the mainstream, and I think it's a very interesting moment in movies and cinema, and I think there was something about telling this story, but using some of the cinematic language and music of older movies that seemed like it echoed the pain of like losing youth or losing your friend. It's bittersweet. There's something melancholy about it, even though it's beautiful and triumphant that the moment has passed.
That reminds me about that Puss in Boots line. Did you go through a bunch of different movies to find the perfect movie to be the sad movie that she's walking into the middle of?
I think actually originally it was a different movie because Puss in Boots wasn't out, but I think it was it was another animated movie. I'll think of it and then I'll let you know.
In the movie, you have a protagonist who's sort of struggling to find herself. It's very much about that time in your life when you're feeling adrift. And the question is, what draws you to a character like that when you yourself are someone who obviously has attained a certain level of success in your field and don't seem like you're necessarily professionally adrift or something like that? So how do you concoct that character and like find points to connect with it?
Well, it's actually a question I've thought about a lot. I think on the one hand, I think I don't think you ever really lose the fear that it's all going to fall apart. I think if you're in any field that's artistic or precarious, and whether you write books or you make music, I think you're always very closely connected to how easily it could have not happened that way. And I think that's something I think about a lot, because I think, especially living in New York, I know so many people, so many actors and comedians and musicians and people who are so talented, and some of them it just hasn't like happened yet, and others it has in a huge way. But I think you don't feel far away from the not happening or the other turn of the wheel. And I also think I think I have an incredible amount of empathy for people who make practical decisions at some point about what they're going to do with their art and their life and how they're going to make it work. And I think Frances makes practical decisions at the end of the movie, and she takes the day job, but she doesn't become less of an artist because of it. And I think I grew up far away from people who were employed as artists, and I didn't know anyone who was a dancer or an actor or a writer growing up. And but I knew a lot of people who were artists, but for themselves and for their community, and it wasn't something that they'll ever be acknowledged for. But I think that's incredibly worthy, and I think Frances is still in it. I don't know, she's still finding her doors.
You do give her, as you said earlier, a hopeful ending in her way. Do you have a kind of imagined future for that character, how things kind of turn out for her 10, 20 years in the future?
No, it kind of ends for me. I think what I love about the thing I love most about any art, or when I go to museums or see theater or go to movies, is that feeling of that's like the frame. That's it. That's all you get. And I had an issue with when I first started seeing movies, there was VHS, but there was no DVD, and then DVDs came out sometime when I was in high school, and people started having them, and they had that thing of deleted scenes, which drove me crazy, because I felt like, but that wasn't part of that character's life. I don't want to see this. Like, that's not, we didn't put it in. That doesn't belong. And I think, I don't know, I think for me as a writer and as an actor, I kind of, it's when it ends, it's almost for me, I feel like I give it curtains, and it feels sad, but that's what I love about it.
Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight. Thank you for your great questions, and thank you, Greta Gerwig.
Thank you. Thanks.